Okay, can everyone please come into your seat? Please bring your refreshments. Feel free at any time to go back and get a refreshment while the talk is going on. We're going to start now. So what we've heard so far is that we need to fight for limitations of government. That's what I took from this. And all are equal, but some are more equal than others. Not so good, right? So we're all God's children, so let's act like it. I think that's the heart of it. And so I'm going to now introduce the founder of the Settlement Project, the inspiration. I really have a great respect for him. He is such a beautiful soul, and I just, please, really take time to just keep an open mind. You know, it's hard to put something in that's full, right? So trust me, you're going to receive a lot of love and truth and wisdom, and again, the spirit is most important. And we're here because of truth. That's our interconnectionness, right? So please, now, let's give a warm welcome to Dr. Frank Kaufman.
Thank you very much, Michael. I think I'm gonna retire from this because I don't like listening to your lectures, David. They make me feel miserable, mostly because they don't sound like they're that long ago. This is what's my difficulty. But we're here because there is a path through all of this. No matter how many times we'll see this same pattern, even perhaps a bit in our current time, or maybe a lot in our current time. The only reason we do this is because there's a path through it, and that's why we're working through the conversation today. So my mission is to explain the successful choices that happened in history as a response to injustice. Okay, this is working. Somebody help me out here, please. Thanks. Just gotta start the show here. Thanks. Good deal. Good deal. All right. So David was describing times in history when oppression, injustice, and inequality were in fact the case, genuinely the case. And there were philosophers that attempted to create systems to solve that problem. He called them secular philosophies, and we saw what happened in two examples so far. What happens when you try to respond to genuine human problems. The medieval times had a lot of corruption, the harmonization of clergy and monarchy to make life quite miserable for the people of the time. The problem is not trying to solve them. These must be solved. So my role throughout the conversation today is to introduce those responses to the same problems that had successes. So let's look at those. Got to get this moving. Down. Got it. All right. Okay, so the first part of what David introduced is the French Revolution, and the second part is, of course, we studied also the Marxist Revolution. So I'm going to be touching on responses both for the French one and for the Russian one that were successful, that actually moved the needle more toward equality and the end of human suffering. The main thing I'd like to as David already made clear, ideas have consequences. Harm from simple criminality does not need philosophies. It's just the fruit of bad human behavior. But if there's going to be mass incarceration, tyranny, control of people, genocide, These arise from philosophies and ideologies, and that's why we need to look at them. The outcome, depending on how one chooses their way, is either a path of totalitarianism, barbarism on the one side, or genuine progress in science and technology and virtue on the other. So how to improve society from a state, an undesirable state, to an improved state is an exact match for how you would approach the same problem in your own life. If there's a condition you're in, you want to make it better, there are simple common sense ways to do that. And this is the exact same way that you expand it or extend it or apply it to social reality. So how I improve myself, we know what works, we know what doesn't work. We've probably tried both, unfortunately. We should try one more often than the other, but we know what works. And we also know ways that fail. And so in the case of trying to understand how societies and social philosophers try to respond to things that we want to make better, we have ways that they both may start off well. They may start off well, but they often end up in horrible outcomes, as we saw from David, such outcomes such as this. And these are people that, am I right, David? They may have started out well-intended. They were trying to correct genuine problems, isn't it? So hopes and intentions may not be bad at first. This is why early detection is needed. It's like a cancer patient. Early detection is needed, and that's why we're holding these seminars, in order to explain very early on. Like, it's not early, it doesn't feel that early, sadly, presently, to me. Somehow we're like 30 years behind. We were asleep at the wheel. But still, hopefully, we haven't yet seen gulags. We have a small gulag in Washington, D.C. now, but we haven't seen them at the level that David's describing. So the purpose of these meetings is early detection, to describe how to identify whether or not an ideology is moving in one direction or another, toward improvement or toward despair. Once we know what we see, we have to have the courage to act and to uproot and eradicate harmful ideas from the very outset, before they eliminate our future and our country. So one of the things that I'm critical of is how much time moral and conservative individuals spend in social media arguing with people you don't know. This is big. It's a phenomenon, and it would be fun if we had the time. Maybe it's fun, but we will lose our country if we persist in this. We can't say that the other side doesn't care. It's a useless argument, and the kind of endless efforts to control the narrative, to establish we care, you don't care, will never make any progress in what we need to do to recover and protect our country. What happens then is we end up in hundreds or thousands of tiring arguments. This one about conception, or when human life begins. That one about race. That one about immigration policy, and so on. These debates are needed and necessary, and the introduction of facts is necessary, but we cannot gain our country back simply arguing and dueling data with people whom, as we heard, we'll hear more. They don't even care whether you exist or not. If you can point out their hypocrisy, it doesn't move us toward the urgent matter of protecting and rebuilding a healthy country. David and I are on a traveling the country doing this, and there's a little bit of concern, oh, this is too ivory tower, this is too academic, what we need is action. And what I'd like to say to that, just very simply, we don't simply need, at least we need to pause and look at the lay of the land, look at the map, see, we don't need to act, we need to win. And we need to make a careful study of what we're up to, because there's a huge body of moral and patriotic people, but we need to really get into a common pursuit together. So we need to look at the map, clarity, solidarity. We cannot afford mistakes. Okay, so here's the basic framework of our conversation today. People should not be maltreated, burdened, or suffer. That's the start. People should not be maltreated, burdened, or suffer. Whenever we see such things, we are moved to remedy the situations. The last 4 years, there have been two major reactions to injustice and inequality: the French Revolution and world communism. These are the two. And there's a third one going on presently, which we'll examine in this afternoon's lecture. Two competing forces arise as a reaction and an attempt to regain the rights of people, to be equal and free. You have a divergent option. One side led to the French Revolution, which we heard about, ended up in the Reign of Terror. Another side ended up in the American Revolution, which was very successful to elevate human beings toward the ideals that just naturally resonate in our heart. People should not suffer under inequality. There should be greater equality, greater freedom, greater opportunity. So what were the two differences which led one to a reign of terror and one to the most beautiful country in the history of the world? That's what I'm about to discuss. Those were two historical philosophies. There is now one which we've called wokeism or woke ideology. It's just a nickname. The technical philosophical name of it is postmodern critical theory. That's what in fact it is. It's manifest ideologically as woke ideology, and that's what we're addressing today. Woke ideology, if you were depressed by the first two lectures of David, wait till you hear the afternoon one. So eat a good meal in case you don't survive. What we are facing today is a philosophy that is the greatest threat to America and contemporary society that we have ever borne. It's the greatest so far. We've reached the end of time. We are at an all-hands-on-deck alarm. This is a life and death juncture. We must expose the roots of error and evil and overtake these forces with the same spirit as our American founders. In the Enlightenment, so why study the past? The reason why we study the past is for two reasons. One, it provides a clear model. Now that we've seen two in a row, we heard the model, we saw the model. David had a repeated slide up. That is the model. Now we can recognize the exact way that functions in our contemporary society. The second reason why is we see the roots of the error. And as the seed is planted, it grows, matures, and becomes ever more toxic and gains strength and matures. Here's the issue. In the Middle Ages, both clerical and political corruption formed into a unified culture to create inequality and oppression. The use of religion to diminish the lives of peasants. The corruption of the clergy. The reaction to this is the key. Is faith and religion itself the origin of human suffering, oppression, inequality? Is faith and religion itself? Therefore, if you hold that, you will opt for some form of secular ideology in response. Faith, religion, God must be replaced. We saw it replaced by two options, one by reason, one by matter. But if faith and religion and God is what causes human suffering, an other option must be chosen. These are secular philosophies. The other option is that a power and privileged elite is the problem. The corruption of the clergy is the problem. Not religion itself, not faith itself. Corruption in the leadership of the institutions, religious institutions. And then in response to that, Reformation, you have Reformation figures challenge the corrupt religious leadership. And they responded not by the removal of religion, not by less religion, but by more religion. They intensified the investment in faith. This distinction seems small, but it is everything. It's the on-off switch. It's the light. It's binary. It's one or the other. Religion is the problem. It must be removed. Corruption of elite is the problem. It must be reformed. This is the option again and again. And it may seem small, but this single point is everything you need to know in a certain way, to know whether or not the person you're talking to would be content to remove you by whatever means, by a smear, by imprisonment, by elimination. David used the word elimination or extermination or extinction again and again. When human reason takes the place of God, this is one of the things. This is an interesting thing which people may not have noticed. But have you noticed that in the kind of clash of American political culture, the conservatives their main problem is they're stupid. Have you heard this? You're brainwashed, or you can't think straight, or it's a cult. You ever heard that one? It's a cult. Why? So this is because it began with the Enlightenment, that cognition, that intellect, that reason is what distinguishes being human. So the lack of cognition or the lack of intellect is what the secular philosophers always regard as the distinguishing and elevating characters. People consistent with the American founders, however, find this to be the case. Virtue, character, and moral law. These are the bases upon which to assess an individual. It's that different. Take, for example, Adam Schiff. And then you think of, what's his name? Henny Youngman. Take Adam Schiff, please. Does anybody consider him unintelligent? Is the critique from conservatives or moral people that he's unintelligent? Not at all. The critique is of his moral character. The problem with Mr. Schiff is that he's a liar. That's the problem. Not that he's unintelligent. And this kind of worship of reason, this kind of dividing line in the American culture today between virtue, character, self-discipline, self-improvement, humility, all the qualities that you find in church or from your mom or from your elder brother or sister. So the French Revolution removes God and faith, whereas the reformers intensify and expand the possibility of God and faith. This is Gutenberg, the Gutenberg Bible. Then there was the Vulgate, translating the Bible into the common languages of the people. All of this eventually led to the American Revolution. The people that came to America was the result of the response to the very same thing that the French revolutionaries were troubled by. The very same thing. The reformers were troubled by the very same thing. They weren't heartless people that said, oh, God is, divine right of kings, just suffer, that's your place. That's not the impulse of spiritual people, of religious people of faith. They couldn't stand it. And so they fought to reform the church. They fought to reform, to make the possibility of the religious experience and the encounter with God and the kind of re-establish morality in the arena of religious life. And this created the Protestant Revolution all throughout Europe, and eventually resulted in the travel to America for the purpose of religious freedom, to worship freely in the United States. And so this is your option, this is your binary, this is what we're introducing today. Each and every time there is a legitimate reaction to the careless mistreatment of human beings, to the rise of inequality, to the corruption of leaders, whether they be secular or religious. Are they to be removed? Is there to be reform? And when the first impulse is for reform, especially on the spiritual and religious side, this is a guarantee that it will evolve and emerge and establish itself in culture and society that will enhance and intensify and bring about what those two groups, they both want the same thing, right? David, wasn't it? They were trying to get more equal. Wasn't it equality? Égalité, right? Fraternité, égalité. These are the ideals. One ended up in grotesque life, walking. You're walking your children to school past somebody's being beheaded, and the whole. This is life in the city, in a relatively modern city, and yet if you look at what happened in societies where spiritual life, attention to God, human faith was embraced and intensified, and the corruption of the church was purified. And not only the Protestants, like Erasmus was a reformer inside the Catholic Church, never left the Catholic Church. That everywhere religion was cleansed, and it resulted eventually in the establishment of the United States. And then look what happens. When you have the intensification of faith and the purification of corruption. You have John Wycliffe. What is it? Translate the Bible into English. Jan Hus. The authority of Scripture. That means you read yourself. You don't have some corrupt guy telling you how to understand things that serve his own benefit. Or the land of his cousin, the church land that belongs to his cousin. So the Scripture over church hierarchy. Erasmus, whom I just mentioned. Again, the purification of Catholic practices. Who else? Luther, the priesthood of all believers, challenging hierarchical structures. He's a revolutionary. The thing is that he's not deciding that he himself is the author of moral law. He surrendered to God, he surrendered to Scripture, and he's participating in the elevation of human beings. The Council of Trent, even Galileo, the foundation of science, he remained faithful to the church. The English Civil War, Oliver Cromwell, the parliamentary sovereignty and religious tolerance. These are all religious people. Locke, separation of powers. The American Revolution, which eventually established this beautiful land. Oh, it's the intensity of the spiritual commitment of the reformers, and to make sure that direct access to spiritual life is made possible by such things as the translation of the Bible into common language of the people, challenging church hierarchies, the Gutenberg press that made the Bible available affordably. It wasn't written by hand, it was printed and everyone could have one. Does that respond? Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, so this is the first collection of what I'm calling the twin rails. David presents the option to consider religion itself the problem and to remove it and replace it with something else, secular philosophy. We've seen it twice in a row. I guess you could keep trying. I don't feel like, I mean, how many times, and it's only gotten worse each time, or the notion that the roots of human being is tied to something greater, and that always has to be invested in with courage. And so there you have, my job is to talk about the counter-proposal and the option of reform and purification and cleansing and intensification of greater spiritual life produced exactly what the revolutionaries of all sorts want: greater human equality. It comes down to the simplest imaginable point. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are, you know the thing, vote for me in 2024. All men are created, endowed by our Creator with inalienable rights. Self-evident. That's what's called in philosophy axiomatic. It's an axiom. I'm not arguing. It's not something you establish by argument. It's self-evident. And what is self-evident? Not only our equality, that we're created equal. We're created. This is the start of everything. This is what is abandoned by the rationalists and the materialists. They abandon that we are created and that our rights are endowed by our Creator. These are where the beginning of simple common sense. You don't even really have to be a religious person. All you have to do is be logical, honestly speaking. Is anybody here self-created? Have you ever met someone self-created? It's a piece of simple logic. Have you ever seen a thing self-created? You got a couple of coffee cups in front of you. Is anything self-created? It's an unreasonable, illogical thing. And yet that simple observation is the beginning of everything, and it's the beginning of the United States of America. So, and our rights, they're universal, they're born into every person. One rail, constructive thought. The other rail, misdirected thought. Here, after the founding of the United States, here are some of the things that happened following the founding of the United States. The abolitionist movement, the abolition of slavery. William Wilberforce, Christian pastor. Women's rights movement. Katie Stanton, Catholic. Susan B. Anthony. These are all religious people. John Wesley spoke out against slavery. Slavery was ended by religious people. Granville Sharp, abolitionist, Christian philanthropist. Rulings against the legality of slavery. Abolition of the slave trade. That's Granville Sharp. William Wilberforce, the single most important figure in the end of slavery, abolished the slave trade and later slavery itself. It has the same origin point as when the French Revolution started. The French Revolution did nothing to help a single soul ever, not one ever. And the reformers, in response to the corruption of the clergy in medieval times, they were not saying, and next we're going to abolish slavery. No. It's just what faith does. It's just what happens when one opts for common sense, not even religion. I mean, I happen to like religion and faith, but just common sense. Please show me something self-created. And then from that, we have the greatest movement of the arising of human equality in human history, all just from the work of the reformers. Anybody recognize this individual? You recognize what that is, right? A slave ship, right? That was his ship. John Newton, the writer of Amazing Grace, because God struck from his heart, God told him the evil of slavery. And Amazing Grace, the greatest Christian hymn ever written, the grace was that God saved him from his life as a slave trader, as a guy who owned a slave ship. So this is the fruits of a simple common sense decision. And so there is hope, despite David's effort to depress us. Okay. All right, so that's part one of my response to, that's just to the French Enlightenment. All of these developments which I just introduced or described here, all of these come from the simple recognition. Well, for them it wasn't common sense. For them it was adherence to faith. They were religious people. To reform the corruption of the medieval system. The question is, do you reform or do you remove and replace? That's that. The next thing David spoke about was communism. And I just want to quickly do a very similar thing. There's two rails, twin options. One option, secular philosophy, Marxism. Another option, similar, the reform concept, the reform movement. Don't remove and replace what is divinely ordained. It would make sense to me anyway. Okay, so here are your options. Reform or remove and replace. Those are your options. By the end of the 19th century, circumstances had changed. It was no longer a corrupt clergy that was causing troubles, that was creating human inequality. What existed was corrupt industrialists, merging with state coercion to subjugate people for the sake of their profit and greed. That's what Marxist was reacting to. Was he wrong? Was he wrong to react to that? There you have it. There you have it. This is why the argument, oh, we care, you don't care, we're right, you're wrong, doesn't work. It doesn't win arguments. What wins arguments is to have a clear grasp of the philosophy, the ideology, and the options. So we have genuine human things that we can't stand to even think about or look at the condition of human beings at the time, and we're faced with the exact same binary. Do we choose reform and harmony and union and unity and impulses towards recognizing the foundational benefits of things if they were only organized and run well? Or do we imagine ourselves, human beings, so incredibly intelligent, which, as I mentioned before, that we're going to come up with something better than God, because God's the problem? Marx had three primary and essential philosophical errors, which David already introduced. One is the in Das Kapital, what is it? The labor theory of value. Labor theory of value. The other is dialectical materialism and historical materialism. Okay, these are three basic elements of Marx's efforts to respond to the evils of the end of the 19th century and the industrial age. The other thing that is everyone knows about Marx is that he was hostile to God and faith. He's hostile to religion, faith in the human experience. Everybody knows the phrase, as David said, religion is the opiate of the people. This is a later phrase. It's a tactical phrase. What is more important is that the rejection of God is essential in the philosophy. And the removal of God, everybody knows Marxist is atheist, right? Everybody knows. And so we think, this is the problem. He removed God. But not many people realize that he wasn't the first one to do this, as we just learned today. It was already tried in the Enlightenment period by the rationalists. They replaced God with human reason, but Marx replaced God with matter. The different thing. Look at the progression there. Which is more elegant? Which is higher? Which is nobler? Human reason or matter? Reason is already that you're making kind of dirt, right? In a way, dirt higher than God and higher than human beings. We are human beings, according to Marx, are the fruits of how dirt behaves. How can a philosophy that begins this way and starts with such a founding utterance hold sway for so long and by so many and still today? I'll explain a little bit of how it holds its sway, but basically, the point is that you can't make that work. You can't make that work. You contort yourself into all kinds of knots and philosophical, and in the end, you can't make that work. That dirt creates eyesight and love, and writing a letter to the girl I love in Japan. Dirt creates that. Can't make it work. So eventually these philosophies, this is part of why these philosophies end up as extermination machines. You have to remove what disconfirms the basis of what you've committed your life to. You must remove it. And so either, as David pointed out, either you have to re-educate or destroy. Re-educate or eliminate. So if the rationalists remove God, what did Marx remove? Marx removes the relationship between the God-given relationship between human beings and nature. That's what Marx removes. It's still an attack on God, but because he's gone down to materialism, not rationalism, not that side of us that thinks on high things and ideals. Ideals. Marx is down in the means of production. So what he's talking about is how human beings are related to the earth. That's what happens next. Because the problem wasn't corrupt clergy bothering people about how they think or interfering with elevated ideas, corrupt clergy. The problem is people interfering with how we survive, how we physically survive. That's what the industrialists were doing. And so when Marx comes up with a secular philosophy, it is that part of what God does. How did God design human beings to be related to the physical earth? That's the question, and that's where this same binary comes up. Here's the starting point. physical reality and our harmonious interdependency with nature will define the logic of our relationship to the world. Jewish and Christian understanding is clear about this. All religious systems are clear about this. All spiritual systems are clear about this. They describe an integrated, harmonious relationship with man and earth. If you remove God out of that, then you end up with the materialism of Marxism, the treatment of matter as higher than God and higher than us. So in spiritual systems, care for the earth is humanitarian. It's not common everyday, quote-unquote, environmentalism. It's humanitarian. I care for the earth because I care about you. I care about my brothers and sisters. I care that people are well fed, that they have nice homes, that they have good environments to raise their children. That's my materialism. That's my, this is, when God created human beings, He created us in a specific relationship to the earth. And this is what Marx was fiddling with, and this is, by calling it secular, he removes the presence of the divine harmony that we find. So as a result, so what is private property? What is private property? Is this kind of Adam Smith? Is it who's a Friedman? You know, is it Locke, Smith, Friedman? You know, is it so that we get rich, so that socialists just make you poor? You know, the societies can't survive. We got rich. You know, we're capitalists, free market. No. Private property is the home of your biblical origins as a human being. You can't. It's where you're responsible. It's where the earth, where you exercise your divine, your divinity. That's the relationship that God designed. So how could Marxism, which is so fundamentally wrong, and which is clearly led to global genocide, how does it retain such devotion and such longevity? How is that possible? Here's why, or here's a possible reason why. Marx identified two things accurately. Emotionally, human suffering causes us difficulty. And so that's one of the hooks that he has for idealistic young people or for old rich exploitation Harvard professors. I'm sorry. Yeah. And also, he presented truth in a modern way. It was scientific, because the nature of the 20th century in which Marxism flourished was a scientific era. It's the emergence of science and technology. And so Marx captures two things. It is emotionally grips you, people are suffering, and it's cool, it's scientific. It's not like you backward Christians who believe that the earth is flat. No. We're scientists. We're scientists. This is science. Scientists know what's what. Science and technology are the great fixers of human problems, not virtue, compassion, patience, sacrifice, integrity. Science and technology. And so this was the nature of Marxism, and this was how it retained its grip on people. Thoughtful people and conscientious people naturally know that owners bear risk, long, thankless hours, keep corporations alive, provide countless people with the chance to earn an honest wage and support their families and send their children to school. Tragically, in the industrial era, many owners became corrupt, addicted to greed. They became inhumane, the image I showed you earlier, and this resulted in human despair and alienation. Once again, same option, same choice. Destruction or correction and reform. Marx chose the latter. violent revolution, destroy the capitalist class, the bourgeoisie, destroy the managerial class or the ownership class. Then you have the Marxist revolution. You destroy the capitalist class, you get rid of all natural bases for creativity, development, and replace it with the absurd fantasy, I'll repeat, absurd fantasy of collective ownership without the ennobling dignity of private property, responsibility, and reward for hard work. This is the path to abject poverty and state tyranny. It's plain and simple. There's three basic parts of Marxist philosophy in which his I'm trying to find a worse word than error, E-R-R-O-R. But anyway, dead wrong, get out of here, or as we New Yorkers say, get out of town, or I can't find, you know, come on, yeah, there. Now we have a whole ticket. Okay. All right. So the first one is the labor theory of value, and this is adopted by economic philosophers or economic theorists as science. And yet everything about it is wrong and has been established as wrong. I can't take this off, but subjective value theory. Value comes from an individual places on a good. Good doesn't have intrinsic value. Like how about a little American pin that my World War II dad gave me as a kid? What's it worth? Labor theory of value has value intrinsic to the matter. It's materialism. Utility. What's its usefulness to the consumer? How about if a leak, I have a leak in my upstairs bathroom, what's a pump worth to me right then? All of this is human determined. It's not matter determined. So the labor theory of value is fundamentally wrong. Technological change, like Marx was trying to quantify the value put in by the workers, by the amount of labor, put the value into the item. But what about the development of technology? That completely changes the amount of value that goes into the production of an item, and the development of technology is completely the result of human creativity. Market dynamics, supply and demand. I'm doing great selling roses in the winter. I'm doing lousy selling roses late spring when everybody's got their, you know. It's again the humans determine value. The difficulty in measuring labor, skills. Okay, is there? I'm sure. There's my buddy Joe over there. It would take me 8 days to do something he can do in a minute and a half. Do you know what I mean? What's the value of the labor? So skills, productivity labors, technological assistance. If he has the gear, if I don't have a camera like that, and I'm using a pencil, you know, so the labor theory of value is fundamentally wrong. Fundamentally wrong. All value is related to the subjectivity of the human being, which is created. Okay. This ravaging of human status, making us below nature, below matter, also contributes to the eco-terrorism of today, of the maniacs that believe that everything is better than being human. That has Marxist origins, because matter was placed higher than God and higher than human beings. It's also the same worship of science spawned the illegal and unconstitutional government lockdowns. These are problems. These are problems. Let's see what I got here now. I've done that a bit. By God's grace, the Soviet Union and its militant atheism was defeated politically and militarily during the Reagan era. Now we just have to overcome two backwaters of failed communism. The CCP, which is self-confessedly and openly communist, self-declared communist, and the intelligentsia of Western universities, graduating people who fill up our media, our corporations, our elected offices, et cetera, et cetera. It's not just enough to complain about the fact. Clear understanding of the philosophical errors are the beginning of making it possible for us to reestablish the propriety, hope for recovering and protecting our country. In addition to the anti-God and anti-human foundations of the labor theory of value, there are two more extremely critical fundamental errors in Marxism. These are where did I get that from? They're pretty, there, okay. Dialectical materialism and historical materialism. The reason why these are importantly problematic, actually even worse than the failures of the labor theory of value. The dialectic describes the process thesis, antithesis, synthesis. This is the dialectic. Dialectical materialism is the ground of being. That which allows us to continue to exist is a product of that dynamic. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Everything exists because of that dynamic. Historical materialism is that history progresses because of that dynamic. So our being, dialectical materialism. The progress of history, historical materialism. How we go from A to B, how we go from year to year, how things change and grow and develop, is from the dialectic. What is the dialectic? Synthesis, antithesis, thesis, antithesis, synthesis. That means that the operative dynamic by which all things exist and all things develop is conflict, antithesis. You go against your origin, that gets resolved, and you progress. You go by being against your origin, that gets resolved, and you exist. This means that the essential operative dynamic in Marxism is conflict. History proceeds by conflict. We exist by conflict. Conflict is the nature of reality. That's why it is essentially violent. It's not also violent. It's not tactically violent or strategically violent. It is violence, the dialectic. That is Marxism. Every scripture and nature itself, the birds and the bees and the planets and the stars, is the story of love, harmony, and symbiosis. That is the opposite binary. That is the opposite choice. Does history proceed through the evolution and unfolding of love, of harmony, of growing together, greater union, greater unity, and we progress? Does my being arise out of the harmonious operation of the elements of my physicality and of my body? It's harmony. It's harmony. And so that's where these slides come from. There they are. That's nature, not conflict. That's the relationship between human beings and matter, not conflict. This is life. It's grounded in harmony. And Marxism, it's grounded in the dialectic of conflict. And so its imagery is violent by nature. Its behavior is violent by nature. And we saw these horrific quotes from David. Just, what was it? A man is the problem, murder is the solution. No man, no problem. The people of faith, in the same period of time that Marxism grew, racial equality, women's equality, social justice, the rise of social justice. Ralph Abernathy, friend of King, Shuttlesworth, what was it? Racial violence, civil rights movement, Jewish rights, civil rights, Desmond Tutu, South Africa. Faith. But again, call it logic. If religion is too hard to sell, call it logic. Just ask tell me who or what is self-created, and go from there. Once you have faith, at the very same time that the Soviet Union and China and all communist states had resulted in over 100 million deaths of their own people inside their own countries, not by wars. At the very same time, we are watching some of the most beautiful rise of human equality and human prosperity. And it just takes a simple, obvious decision of reform, restart. And I'd like to say, not only just reform and restart, but in this case, a kind of a new American revolution. I really believe in a new American revolution. Because what is the foundation of the American Revolution? Kill the bastards? No. It's just simply, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that should be working. This afternoon, we want to look at how to make that work one more time. And I think we can have a long time ahead of an even more beautiful America. So this afternoon, we will move on to the woke revolution, woke ideology. This is a mostly peaceful riot. A mostly peaceful protest. And these are some of the things that we'll be looking at this afternoon. Thank you very much.
I want you to explain what after, when we have the group pairing. I'll tell you in a minute. Okay, please stay here. We're going to have questions, Q&A. So anyone who has a question, we're going to give you the microphone. You can come up and ask a question. Dr. Burgess and Dr. Kaufman will suffice. So anyone have a question? Please come up and...
Question?
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Josh. Dr. Burgess, you mentioned in your presentation about deism, we had this conversation, and of course, a number of the American founders, prominently Benjamin Franklin, Jefferson, and Washington, were so-called deists, but they had a view of God and God's providence. And so would you talk a little bit more about the role it played in making it a nation where God was welcome, not necessarily only a Christian nation, which was at the heart of some of the challenges that had to produce the First Amendment so that all people could, in fact, worship or live successfully in America?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, so it's true that some of the American founders were deists, not all, but some were. Deism, by itself didn't create the French Revolution, of course, and it didn't create the American Revolution by itself either. Unfortunately, in France, for example, it was combined, as we looked at with sort of Rousseau's idea that was against private property. In America, on the other hand, it was philosophically a lot based on John Locke, who actually promoted the idea of private property, and very much for the same reasons that Frank mentioned, that it was a space for people to grow and develop their own family and freedom. But I think more importantly, we're going to talk some this afternoon about this, but in America, anyway, it was a long time ago, and people don't know the story that well, but the people who came here from Europe, from all the different traditions and different ethnic backgrounds and different religious backgrounds, didn't come here and just fall in love with each other, right? Actually, they fought terrible wars back in Europe. Europe was, its history is littered with terrible wars, and we'll touch on some of that. But they came from different religious traditions, and frankly, when they got here, they fought as well. And that's why they didn't form a United States. They all had their own individual colonies, and they competed with one another. And it was only over time, and also in part due to the first Great Awakening, that they created a more common identity and a more unified tradition where they could practice their own individual religion but have a sense of this greater, what we used to call the American civil religion. And it was based on that unity, not on conflict, that America became a successful nation. And I think more importantly, the point you made, and I'll end with this, the American deists nonetheless believed strongly that there was some divine providence at work in their coming here and in the nation they were forming. And Benjamin Franklin, who was known as not a very religious person, was the one at the Continental Congress when they reached an impasse who called for prayer, because he understood that without God behind this, and without this providential sense of what they were trying to create, that it wouldn't succeed. So anyway, that's a fundamental difference, I think, between the two revolutions. Good question, thanks.
Question?
Do you think that Karl Marx today would think that the issue of all the transgenderism going on would be under his belief in the creating the division?
It's a good question. You want to? I'll answer, but I'll let Frank go first.
Yeah, I think he would find it handy. I don't think it would be consistent with his vision of a classless society. It's outside the consideration of what his concerns were. But the destruction of a capitalist society, it's perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's essentially right. But we're going to touch on this afternoon that we're in a little bit different era now, and the gender and racial issues have risen to the surface, and the class ones have kind of disappeared. There are still Marxists who are promoting that, but that they're not the ones that are behind this, what we see. And in fact, you've touched on what I think is one of the key flashpoints of the struggle right now, and we'll talk more about that this afternoon. So hopefully you'll get a clearer answer then.
Yeah, good question.
Yeah.
Practical things in California. So you were talking about the kind of basic human nature of wanting to have ownership and connection with nature. And then how would you suggest dealing with the issue of people trying to work hard and not even being able to afford to buy a house? We have so many renters, and it's like impossible to manage that. Any suggestions?
Another great question.
Yeah.
it's a great question, and my response is brand new. It's not a deeply considered thing for me, but as best as I can think on my feet on the spot, I believe that the types of problems you're describing, like the housing crisis or the inability of hardworking people to support their lives and so forth, it's a reflection of the abandonment of the sovereignty of the individual guaranteed by the founding ideals of the United States, the sovereignty of the individual. And I think that, I notice in my own neighborhood, I live in New York City, that almost nothing is owned by a person anymore. It's all owned by the rapid fire of computers firing away all day long. There's people behind it, like it's an Arab-Chinese, coalition of owners which all have part stocks, and the purchaser of where people live. They're just buying up houses, and you don't have a landlord to appeal to. Basically, computers are just churning away to find out one additional penny that can be made off of a renter, or just churning away to find out, like in the next 4 months, this particular section of town is going to be, you can make an extra like $40 a month of rent, or just, so buy out all those houses, drive out all those people, and just the raw greed, the globalism that is influencing American economic unfolding has abandoned the protection of the sovereignty of the individual, and so I believe it's a force of globalism, and I believe it's a force of greed and corruption, and so there needs to be, similarly as I described in my response to the other two revolutions, recognizing what needs to rise in terms of purifying and fixing and correcting these directions. It's a new capacity for people to control and exploit. And we saw it twice. We saw the secular option fail twice. And now we saw the spiritual option succeed twice. What dimensions of spirituality, of the affirmation of my identity as born of God, needs to be communally established, and what's the fight that needs to be fought to reform the current economy, which is different than the industrialist economy? Thanks a lot for that question.
Yeah, let me just add one quick thing to that too. I don't know, traditionally it seemed like the role of government was to be like a fair arbiter, to create essentially kind of a fair playing field on which people could operate. But more and more it feels like that they are, in a sense, promoting the interests of the government itself, capitalizing on some of this in ways of, like saying, okay, so here's the problem, so here's our solution, and it's also another government-run program, another government-run solution, and it's had the effect of growing the strength and power of the state. But also, look, I mean, if you depend on the government for everything, you're going to vote for the people who say they're going to give you everything, right? So I feel like our notion of government needs to undergo a correction right now, because the more the government grows, yeah, well, anyway, the classic, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. So, yeah, anyway.
Face each other, and then make a topic.
Okay. All right. So we left time in the program for small group discussion, but the room doesn't really lend itself to that easily or that well. So what I recommend is to figure out how to get with 3 or 4 or 5, turn your chairs around, be a little circle, a little small group, and dedicate maybe 10, 15 minutes, or I think the time will go fast. It may sound long, but 10 or 15 minutes. And the general question was, what are radically different about the 2 revolutions we described? The French rationalist revolution, the Russian and materialist revolution. What's radically different? What's similar? What is kind of a recurrent thread or similarity? So distinctions and similarities between the 2 revolutions, because what we want to do is translate that up into what we're facing today, the revolution of the woke ideology. So make a small group, spend 10 or 15 minutes, and then when we're finished, we're going to hear from a couple of people from their groups what they came up with.
Yeah. So any insights you got too, please share them with one another.
Yeah, afterwards, maybe someone from your group can volunteer to share what you gained from that. You just turn around. And then we're going to have lunch right after that. Right here, we have a great lunch. Joe Fo has a restaurant down here in the city. He has 2 restaurants. He helped out. So we have a really nice meal for you at lunch. So please enjoy. And just after that, we're going to take a picture up here before we eat lunch. So don't leave. You're not going to get lunch.
It's a counter-proposal to communism. So you have communism, then you have the counter-proposal, which is the argument against it. It's called Calza. The mortgage Spanish. And anyway, that manual, like I said, I just read it again, and it's all about that. I deliver milk. Really well. You know, and here's the thing, when you're reading about the communist point of view.
That's inspiring. You don't want to stop. You want to keep your groups. That's pretty cool. You got to leave your tribe. We're going to go to the next level here. So is there anyone who would like to come up from your group and share something? A question? Yes. Wayne Hankins. Here we go. No, you got it. Oh, they're just going to share. They'll just share.
Okay, I would like to thank, first of all, the simplicity that Dr. Kaufman brought to the conversation. Do we either reform, correct, acknowledge the wrongs, or do we use revolution, do we use conflict to do it? In our group, the question came up. In order to correct and reform, it requires dialogue. It requires talking. And those who have different views are not open to communicate calmly and peacefully. What do you suggest? Yeah.
More time.
Okay. Anyone else like to?
John?
Big John? Good. Bring that.
Yeah. I guess we kind of talked about a lot of things really quickly. So, what we seem to glean from the presentation so far is actually I said this, but the suffering, and then the ideology to fix it, apparently, and everything started off as as a good idea. And what evolved, and finally, which destroyed things, was they ended up with a tyranny. And it was basically my way or the highway. You're with us or you're against us, and if you're against us, then you're gone. And so that's where their failure was. And I guess and we seem to be trying to see some of the notes here. Yes, we seem to be in today. Actually, we seem to be being divided up on purpose. You have the transgenders over here. You have the poor people over there. The rich people there. You have just black and white and Asian and whatever. And so they're just trying to in my opinion, is divide us all up to make sure that we're not united. And so we're easier to conquer. Anyway, that's kind of my two pennies anyway.
Anyone else? Thank you, John. Anybody else? The founders of our the founding fathers, they were very intelligent men, and also they were, in my opinion, clairvoyant. They had a really, they could see the future because they went through so much. So we were sharing the depth of suffering and the challenges that they went through. When you really hear what happened and you really listen to the heart of what happened, and not just there, but around the world, anybody who suffered. And I think that we're here to make it better, to make our lives better, to make the world better, to be global patriots, right? So, people, you say Victor Hansen, Victor David Hansen, a really great historian. Thomas Sowell, great man. I really feel like what we're hearing today is so rich and coming from such a high level of thought. And so Thomas Sowell talked about statistics, and then there's lies. So, we may say a statistic. For example, 90% of young people are not thinking about the future, about others, thinking about themselves, their own career, something like that. 90% of the people coming in our country, the millions that are coming through, are fighting age men. Whether those statistics are absolutely true, I know. I was recently at a conference for sheriffs, constitutional sheriffs, and there were so many interesting points, but the one man who does drones, he says he sees there's encampments of training camps right inside Mexico. So there's some serious stuff going on. And so we really need to look and learn, the Sons of the Republic, and that's what we're here for today. So I would like to just mention about lunch coming on that note, that I got to mention we had a really good man here in our local restaurant donate some really nice sandwiches. We have pork sandwiches. They're from Vietnamese sandwiches, and chicken and tofu. So 3 types. So you can choose in the back. And we have drinks, and we have some other little goodies. And so, but before that, I'd like to, today it really is about, no matter what system we have, it's about character. It's about yourself. We the people, right? Integrity. And so I really want to point out 3 men who have, in my experience, I've known them and I've known them pretty long, and I want to just mention Michael Leone and Patrick Hickey and Jeff Tallotson. These men, they really are what I consider, global patriots. They've invested so much in a public life in a leadership sense. And just as I gave earlier, this painting from David Cantrell, like I mentioned, there's sculptures in 2 of our state capitals. I have 3 of these for you 3 men, and I'm so grateful so grateful for all you've done and continue. You're awesome men, and we need more people like that of high character. So on that note, let's have a great meal, but before that, can we take a picture of everybody here? It'd be really nice if you all can come up front and we take a photo of all of us together, okay?
Do you want something on the screen? The screen to be off? I think the screen has to be off because people are
Yeah.
in front of it.
Yeah, yeah. Come on up.
Do we need to move anybody? Do we need some from over there to there? Or how are we doing, all right?
Does it look right? Is it even?
It's okay. 1, 2,
I think we need to squeeze them over there.
please. Look at me.
Squeeze in?
A little bit at the ends. All right. More? That's good.
Don't move.
Yeah, that's good. 3, 2, 1. All right.
Okay, at least, okay.
One more.